It's a very, very good point. Well, Harry Tanya is with us. He's a former armed response officer, former armed response police officer. Harry, I'm really, really worried about this. We've got a little bit of political leadership, I think, today from Kemi Badenoch. She's challenging Starmer. She says they've got to be reviewed. But the Conservatives brought these in the first place. Boris Johnson has attacked the growing scourge of what he calls the thought police in the Mail as well. He says Sir Keir Starmer's Britain is, he's compared it to the Soviet Union at its worst. That might be hyperbole, but the fact is we have 12,000, 13,000 of these non-crime hate incidents, and they're taking away from what you and your fellow officers did previously, which was old-fashioned idea, solving crimes.
Yes, and I'm wondering if I've got one on me somewhere, because I wouldn't necessarily know about it. Maybe you have, Peter. I don't know. Who knows?
Maybe I'll find out. Maybe there'll be some cops at my door tomorrow morning. You never know.
Or if you apply for a job that needs an advanced check on your DBS check. So it is concerning, isn't it? And it's something that's been slipped around the government, hasn't gone through Parliament. It's just been accepted as the norm. Now, I do remember this. I left the police in 2020, April 2020. And I remember these non-crimes even then. And we all discussed them thinking, this is not right. What is this? And it was coming from the College of Policing. So we're not pointing at Labour or Conservative, but Labour seem to be embracing it. They like this because I think they're liking to quash a bit of dissent at the moment, especially if they tie it to anti-Semitic, which they're trying to do, and Islamophobic. It means don't discuss it. Don't discuss it publicly. And the problem we have, of course, is it's perceived to the victim is the definition. The victim, they're already a victim. And I remember also that either it was a suspect or a victim. It wasn't a reporting person and a suspect. That is completely wrong. And I remember we had discussions with this amongst ourselves, police officers. Well, what if my partner made a complaint against me? She's a victim, and who makes the complaint first?
Yeah.
What is really concerning about this is the definition is a perceived to the victim or any bystander, somebody walking by, that it's motivated by hostility or prejudice to the victim based on a protected characteristic. Now, I've got to say to you, as a police officer, I'd go to an absolute non-job, and I was quite, proud of myself, and this is rubbish. Sort yourselves out and let's go away. Oh, well, I perceived it as a hate crime because he's got protected or she's got protected characteristic. Right. Okay, now I have to deal with it. Now it goes through the inspector, it gets assessed, it gets fully investigated. So guess who's weaponising it?
Yeah, and the problem in all of it is it's about perception as well. So it's whether, non-hate crime, I was looking at the specific definition, which you'll know better than I do, Harry, but it was about whether it is perceived to be hateful by the person who is on the receiving end of it or any other person. So if
someone walking by. Yes.
So if you said to me during the course of this interview, Peter, you've put on a bit of weight recently, you're clearly fat and lazy, and I said, well, that's hate, and I'm a fat person, and therefore that is a non-crime hate incident. It wouldn't be necessarily me. Someone watching could report you for that. I mean, that is just absurd.
Peter, we could be the best of friends and taking the joke about each other, and you say, Harry, your hair's really, you're receding a bit or whatever, and we're laughing because we have a dark humour. But one of your listeners reports it as a hate crime or whatever, because one of us may be gay or whatever, or whatever. And it may not, they may perceive it, well, I think he's gay, so therefore it's a hate crime. And I think he thought he was, and yet he isn't. And therefore, it's ridiculous.
I mean, I'll just be totally honest with you, and I'm sure he won't mind me saying this. I mean, Jeremy Kyle says stuff to me all the time off air, which is basically some of the, it's similar to, so he doesn't say I smell of fish, but it's similar to some of this stuff. And
well, this is another problem.
And it's banter. It's funny. It's in the office. It's just a bit of crack, a bit of fun. It doesn't matter. It's not a big thing. It shows. He wouldn't be saying it to me if he didn't like me. I like Jeremy. Jeremy likes me. We're friends. We're colleagues. And this is the death of banter in some respects. There are some times when people do say really hateful things on social media. Sometimes when people do say really hateful things on social media, there are times when maybe something needs to be done, but it's where you draw the line, and there are definite examples here of telling someone smells of fish, or is a 9-year-old calling someone a silly name or something. It's just absurd. It's got out of control.
I think a one-off comment in anger fine. If it's persistent and for a long period of time on social media, somebody's trying to destroy someone's reputation, their character, which could affect their jobs, then okay, you need to get in there and sort it out and say, wind your neck in. Okay, but one-off comments, somebody is going to take offence on social media.
But I also think, I mean, in terms of that with trying to destroy someone's reputation or, you know, having a targeted campaign, I mean, the libel laws will often deal with a lot of that as well. I just want to ask you about the Home Secretary, about Yvette Cooper, because the Free Speech Union has been talking about how they may actually take legal action against her in regard to non-crime hate incidents. I wonder what you think of that as a strategy, Harry.
I think it's the only thing that's available right now, because I was talking to a police officer from West Mids yesterday, and he was saying, oh, if we got rid of Facebook, we'd be all out of a job. It is ridiculous. Therefore, something needs to be done. If this had gone through Parliament properly with discussion, so you could actually discuss the pitfalls of it. And the fact that some people, if you are a criminal and you have a protected characteristic, boy, are you going to use it every time. If you are an activist, if you're particularly into the trans, gay rights or whatever, and you're going further and further into the extreme, nobody can criticize you. Nobody can argue with you, because they can perceive it, even if they don't. They'll say they blooming well do.
And we've seen that. We've seen that time and time and time again. And, you know, there are criticisms made of certain people for absolutely nothing to do with, you know, earlier on we were talking to, I don't want to characterise what Jonathan Liss was saying, but he was saying, oh, you know, Rachel Reeves gets a lot of misogyny. Maybe they're just criticising her because she's not a good chancellor. You know, maybe it's nothing to do with her being a woman. If they say, well, what would a woman know about the economy? That is clearly a sexist thing. But if they're just criticising her and saying, I don't think she's a very good chancellor, that's not necessarily sexist or a hate crime or a non-crime hate incident. Let me ask you just about one other story, and this is about residents selling up and leaving their once beautiful village after claiming migrants living in a hotel have turned it into a hellhole. This is in a Berkshire village of Datchet. What do you make of this story, Harry?
I think the people who are all for it and support it tend not to live in the areas and see the inevitable disruption, because there's going to be disruption. Even if you've got a whole load of Brits and stuck them in there, young males, fighting age, as they say, there's very few women and children, which is extremely suspicious, and people give various strange explanations for that. Yes, I'm sure there's the majority of them are completely decent people, but they're bored, they're single males, and they're wandering around a village, and they're probably looking at young women dressed in a way that they're not used to. Either it's sexually exciting to them, or they're completely insulted by it. They're coming from a different culture, a lot of them, not all of them, we have to say that to keep everyone happy. But if you inevitably are bringing 750,000 people to live here permanently every year, from different backgrounds of various war-torn zones or very poor countries with different beliefs and cultures, you are going to get friction. And yes, inevitably it's going to take property prices down. Inevitably it's going to stretch not only the police, there will be more hate crime recorded because they have protected characteristics. The police are going to be overwhelmed. If you think your NHS is overwhelmed, then wait for a few more 250,000 people. And this is not to castigate or target these people. You just get a bunch of males, bring them into a country.
If you're in a village with maybe a couple of thousand people, and you bring in a few hundred people, that is going to change the character of things. That is, it doesn't matter if they're 150 people from the next village. That is going to change the character of things. Harry, thanks for your analysis of that. That's Harry Tanya, who is a former armed response officer in the police.